I am a daughter of this soil. Like many of my countrymen, I have merged with this land of my birth. I want to narrate about these men and women who came here, were born here, and were patriots of this nation, Singapore, that we are proud of to be a part of today. Many have left an indelible mark in the development of Singapore and Malaya. They were a part of Singapore's nation builders that cannot be denied their pages in history and their place in the annals of Singapore's development. This is a solar hat that was worn by my grandfather, Sarvanamuthu Iliyathambi, when he helped to build the roads. And there, amongst the rich silks, lie my grandmother Meenachi's visiri, the fan she used to cool herself on hot sultry nights in Malaya. But this story is not just about my grandparents or my own forefathers. They are one of the many Ceylon Tamil pioneers that crossed the Palk Straits, the Bay of Bengal, to come here. Remember that they were not the first, as beyond time. We know that many a Tamil man did travel these seas to reap the rich spices and hoard the pearls. My own roots here, I know, began as far back as 1850s, and many that are present here today trace historical dates of generations of countrymen that came to this region, like my grandfather Sarvanamuthu Iliyathambi. Dr. Anand Kumar and Mr. Paul Subramaniam speak of such early beginnings.
Both my father's side and my mother's side, we can trace back our ancestry to about 1,500 years backwards. But the part which, of the family history, we put a map, put a stamp on the map, started off in the late 17th century and onwards.
My great-grandfather, Sinnathambu Arumugam, on my father's side, that's my father's father's father, came to Malaya and was an overseer in Selangor with the PWD.
Across the ocean, my forefathers sailed on tiny boats called pai couples or surul couples that rode huge waves in stormy waters. Later in time, my countrymen came in steamers and sailboats to work on a land with hope for wealth and glory. When the Ceylon Tamils first came to Malaya and Singapore, they took great risks as the route was rough and dangerous. In the early days, there were no steamers and they had to travel along the coast from Jaffna's ports of Kangesanture, Velvetiture and Point Pedro for many miles, reaching into India's ports of Vedarniam or Nagapattanam.
He was given this job of opening up roads. Everywhere was just thick jungle. And those days there was no sort of cars and things like that which would take him. So he used to go on a horseback. And he took with him about 5 or 6 servants which he brought all the way from this place called Vedaranyam.
Here, a large labour force would join them to catch a steamer to Malaya and on to Singapore. If the weather conditions was favourable, it would take a couple of days. For those that took the route via Pamban Islands in India, then into Colombo, Penang and on to Singapore, travelled on deck for almost 5 days or more. They paid 5 rupees for an adult. The women waited long, pining for their beloved, as day followed night and night followed day. The first of these incursions predates written records, and a great deal of information about the earliest Tamil settlement of Ceylon is perhaps conjectural with a mystical or legendary element to it. The origins of these Tamils emerged from the Indian subcontinent, many of them from various habitats that have merged and integrated for hundreds of years to call Ceylon their own. The movement of people from South India is better documented to include the Chola and the Pandya kingdoms that have undeniably left their deep-rooted marks with their invasion of the island. Subsequently, there was a migration of families from the Chettiar castes from South India in the 1700s. Ceylon has had its own distinct community of Tamil people for centuries. There is also evidence of infusion from the northern regions and elsewhere that had liaisons that brought about some unique individuals that were Tamils, but not quite having looks of a typical Tamil because of the alliance. The influence of the West was just not the liaisons, but also the religion and education. And with that too came names that were unusual. And if you wondered a little that they were of South Asian stock, but had unadulterated names such as McFarlane, Dudley, Knight and Snell, then here is the truth of it all.
Tamil Christians had taken on Western names, because they felt taking on names that were originally Tamil, maybe not quite in keeping with the Christian faith, particularly names of gods. You see, like Shiva, Dr. Shiva and Subramaniam, and all this type of names were actually names of Hindu gods. And the Christians of the early period were prone to selecting Western names. Because my mother's side, they were Snells, there were Carpenters, and then there were also the Danforths, you see. And so these were the classical names, and very many people have different theories why this came about. Some, of course, say that they were sponsored, and so they took on the names of their sponsors. Others took on the names of missionaries like Payson. My grandfather's father was Payson Mudaliar. And then there was also various other Christian names. My mother, of course, as I said, was Snell. So these are very interesting things. And there's another theory that they said not only they sponsored the so-called, we are caste-ridden community. So that is why, the Christians, some Christians were of the poorer class of Tamils. But when I went in 52, this was drilled into my head that we came from the Valalas, and not to forget that. So, and they said that it was your grandfather, your great-grandfather on the mother's side, who gave part of the land where Woodville Girls' School and the church stands. So they were known to be landed gentry.
Being a caste-ridden society, it was easy for the missionaries to reach the poor class to convert them. But that did not mean that the wealthier landowners, the Vellalars and the aristocrats did not reach out for this further wealth of a lifetime. The mission schools were many, and one of the first ones were the Union College that opened in 1816, and it was known to be the first English school in Jaffna.
The British came and introduced missionary schools, American missionary schools in Jaffna, because they did not want to educate the majorities, the Sinhalese. So the Tamils had the advantage of having English education. But the problem which they encountered during that period is to get English education, you had to become a Christian. If you are not a Christian, you didn't have chance of getting into the schools. So what my great-great-great-grandfather did was When he left the house, he was Nichingam. But when he reached the school, he was Fred Samuel. And after finishing the school, when he came back, he went to the temple, asked for forgiveness, applied the holy ash on his forehead, and became Nichingam again. So in his heart, he was a Hindu. He was always a Hindu. He was born a Hindu. He died a Hindu. Just for the educational purpose, he became a Christian.
My grandfather, Reverend James Aramugam Subramaniam, was born in Jaffna in 1880 in Vatakotte. On the death of his father in 1888, his maternal uncles thought it would be a good idea for him to have a father figure influence and sent him to Singapore in 1890. In 1892, he joined Anglo-Chinese school. The reason they sent him here was because his maternal uncle, who was called Mudaliar Sambandha, was living in Singapore at the time. My grandfather came from a very devout and well-known Hindu family in Vatakotte and Jaffna, and the influence of Anglo-Chinese school, and particularly of the Methodist mission, had a profound effect on him, such that in 1896, as a boy of 16, he became a committed Christian and he renounced Hinduism. At that time, he also took on the name of James, a biblical name, and so his name became, instead of Subramaniam Aramugam, it became James Aramugam Subramaniam. He changed the Subramaniam, which was a devout Hindu name, to a Subramaniam with a P, and thereafter always carried the name Subramaniam as a family name, and that has become our surname as a family on the male side since 1896.
It started worrying many Hindus that the Christians were making inroads and converting men and women through education. And so, Arumuga Navalanar, the famous sage of Jaffna, urged for the Hindu schools to be opened. Hence, the equally good schools, such as Jaffna Hindu College, were developed by the Hindus. Establishments of excellence, such as Victoria Institution in Kuala Lumpur and Raffles Institution in Singapore, saw many great teachers and principals from Jaffna College and other schools in Jaffna crossed their thresholds. The school was an alumni for luminaries such as S. Rajaratnam, the Sultan of Brunei, and many, many more.
The Jaffna Tamil community was dedicated to education. It's a community that set a high value on education. And when the first wave of migration came into Malaya and Singapore, they automatically gyrated, you see, and went to having their children educated in schools. And that's how they became involved with the missionaries, and that's how the Indian Christian, Jaffna Tamil Christian community was formed, you see, because of that interaction. Everything was centered on education.
It was this education that attracted the British to bring the middle rank workforce when they colonized Malaya and Singapore. The first of the forces came with the surveyors and the builders that built the railways between Port Weld to Taiping in record time. The life was harsh and the terrain rough. As we listen to the story from Jayalakshmi Thanabalasingham, a granddaughter of the Naganathas that were one of those pioneer surveyors.
And so he used to take these men along with him, and there are several times when he's just got lost in the jungle for about weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So on one occasion he took my grandmother with him, and she was the first lady to go on a horseback those days. She used to wear those Victorian dresses and climb onto the horse and go along with my grandfather. And when they get lost, there's no way of any food. They used to eat the bananas from the trees, also, very rough ones. And then from the pitcher plant, they used to get water when it rains. That's how they survived.
Mr. Rameshwaram was another who declared,
I'm a surveyor. I know every inch of Singapore.
and he knew the length and the breadth of Singapore as he surveyed it on foot. He regales of having walked from Katong to Mandai and Bukit Timah to Changi, and all this was paid a paltry sum of 50 cents a day and worked hard. They formed the second rank of administrative personnel that helped to develop the colony fast and efficiently. Through these connections, more emigrated to take up posts recommended by their friends and relatives. In the old days, it was a habit of the Ceylon Tamil to extend jobs out to their own community and help them economically rise.
And then how then when the Singapore, the British fellows ran in, say we want to recruit 3 clerical officers. So the chap will tell the boss, sir, I got cousins in Ceylon. Can we bring him? Yeah, I can bring him. Very smart, the European. They said when he brings cousins, he don't have to look after them. These fellows look after the cousins. You see how clever they are. So when they bring their cousins to work here, they will control the cousins. I don't have to control them. That's why so many Ceylonese chaps there. All relatives were.
Rubber was planted, and with that, the infrastructure to transport it to the ports was developed fast and furiously. The birth of the rubber industry flourished from here in Singapore with its introduction into Malaya.
My father came out with his father, Josiah Rasea Dudley, who was a planter. He came with Carey from Carey Island, and Carey was a coffee planter in Ceylon.
The early planters from the estates of Ceylon's coconut, tea and coffee were brought into the region. The Dudleys were some of those early pioneers that came in on that manifesto.
He started off with rubber. His coffee, I think he abandoned it.
But with them, they also brought in one of today's most unwelcome migrants, the crows from Ceylon.
Now, another anecdotal story is this. There was an article some time ago about crows in Port Swetnam and Carey Island. They had said that my grandfather, Josiah Rasea Dudley, had brought in 8 pairs of crows. And now the real plague of our time, these crows, are apparently descendants of those crows.
By the dawn of the 20th century, the Ceylon Tamils were well established and respected in the FMS. The Ceylon Tamils attained positions of eminence in engineering, medicine, education, religion, civil administration, and the law.
It was a tradition among our people that they take up the professions, namely medicine, the law, teaching, etc. They were not just professionals in a narrow sense of the word. They had value systems and they had motivations to get wider involvement in the community and the country. They had they were while they were very proud of their ethnic identity, there was no problem for them to have relevant links with the rest of the society in Singapore.
They became entrenched in the fabric of the region's society. In Ceylon, the medical field noted many personnel from the best Christian missionary colleges, such as the Green Memorial Hospital in Jaffna, that moved into the medical health services here to bring exemplary systems from Jaffna to the Federated Malay States. But by 1905, Singapore opened its own medical college, the King Edward VII School of Medicine.
My name is A. Vijayaratnam. My father came from Sri Lanka to join the King Edward VII School of Medicine to do a 3-year course.
In the first year, in the very first year, that is in 1910,
Yes.
there was Jnana Prakasam, was one. There was Lee, or there was one Lee, I don't know whether, yes, Dr. Lee. Yeah, they were in the first year.
I see.
And then the very next batch in August, there was Dr. Thambu, Dr. Chilaya, and quite a, Saravanamuttu, Vaithlingam, many of these are, yes, quite, if you look through the names, you have quite a...
Almost 90% of the South Asian students that passed out of it in the first 50 years were Ceylon Tamils. Soon, the Federated Malay state government realized that they needed to bring in the families and improve on the standards of infrastructure for the families to be accommodated. With the arrival of the families, schools were the most important of the needs addressed, as the children of the Ceylon Tamil was already receiving the best in Jaffna. Raffles in Singapore and Victoria Institution in Malaya had some of the best teachers and principals from Ceylon. Ambivagar, a Jaffna College pupil, taught at the Raffles and became the first Asian principal for the school.
He went to college with the intention of specializing in English. He wanted to be transferred to a secondary school, preferably Raffles Institution. He thought he would never get it there because of the expatriate policy of reserving special schools for expatriate teachers.
The inception